Welcome to part 2 of our 6-part episode of Shomari Jones's visit to Dr. Paul Sutton's class at Pacific Lutheran University. Please forgive the variation in volume as parts have been edited for sound quality. Please enjoy this episode.
Hey everyone, this is Dr. Catherine Kennedy, founder and executive director of Wellness for Educators. We are so excited to serve as the sister podcast of Coffee with a Little Bit of Cream. We're grateful for the opportunity to cross-post and amplify Shomari Jones and Paul Sutton and their mission as they examine issues that impact education and the education system, and ways that issues of race, power, and privilege impact students, educators, schools, districts, and the larger educational system. Here's the next episode for your listening pleasure.
When the power is out and still holding Dr. Taylor to his work and getting his work done, even though his power is out. Something that we've talked a lot about a lot in the program is giving students that wiggle room and accommodations for when things are not going well at home and things are not going well in their lives. But then there's also this keeping the bar high for all your students and holding them to that bar and not lowering it just because of the student's background. So what I'm struggling with is sort of where that balance lies between accommodating students based on their needs and other things going on outside of school, but still holding them to that bar, and how do you sort of navigate that space?
I got some opinions about that. All right, so that poor black kid really needs us to hold his hand. Bump that. That don't work, right? Everybody needs us to hold them lovingly accountable for the things that we require from them. Maybe when something's going sideways in their lives, it's your opportunity, maybe your responsibility, to co-construct a solution as to how to get this done. You still got to do it. You still got to do it, homie. Whether it's due today at 5 or due tomorrow at 8 a.m., it's still got to get done. Right? I'm not backing off on the assignment. I'm not backing off on the requirement. I'm not backing off on holding you accountable. I may be slightly lenient, but I'm going to be the same lenient with everybody in this classroom, right? If you come to me and we talk about this and we co-construct a solution that's going to best fit what your needs are. That's the way the world should work, I think. It doesn't, right? But all of us run into obstacles sometimes. I bet you if you got in a car accident and your mom's in the hospital with COVID and you tripped and fell and broke your kneecap, Dr. Paul would be like, okay, look, check it. I know that this assignment is due, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a break, just to get this into, you know what I mean? But that's on you, especially for our youngsters, our younger people, right? They need you to show up as the leader sometimes too, helping them out of the challenge. They're not going to do it themselves oftentimes. Some of them will be emboldened and courageous enough to say, I need something more. I need an opportunity to catch a break. But this is another trust-building activity. I see you. I'm observing some patterns. What do you need? What do you need from me? You can't escape this thing that the system says you must do. I don't absolutely agree with the system all the time. The rigidity in the system is hardcore to the point where it does negatively impact some people sometimes. I don't have control over that. But I do have control over how I treat you in my space. Let's talk about that, right? Let's, negotiate a little bit with that piece. That's my...
Yeah, and I think that's fairly consistent with the way the counsel we've been trying to give you in the program thus far, right? This idea that, first off, if you don't know your kids, as Shomari has pointed out several times already, if you don't know your kids, if you don't have trust with them, then you don't know necessarily the difference between this is huge in the kid's life and this may be like a speed bump, right? If you don't know all the history this kid is going through based on your relationship with them, your experience with them in the class, then you're really not too sure what your starting point is going to be about the accommodations you're going to extend to the child. So it's all about knowing them first. Right? And then, knowing them, but then being clear with them. I need you to do this thing, because I think it'll be important not only for you personally, but in the future for whatever you choose to do for these reasons. Right? Part of the story of this is being transparent with our assignments with students, making sure our assignments are relevant. They reflect something authentic that happens out in the world. Right? So kids see the value of it. We don't have to put up some big old song and dance about why do you have to write this 5-paragraph essay, or why do you have to do X, Y, or Z. Right? Design, lesson design, unit design is so crucial for this because it helps provide some of the motivation students have for then doing the work. So when things then go sideways in our kids' lives, we know the difference between dodging assignments and I just can't deal with this right now. And then it gives us an empowered perspective to then cooperate with the student when things do go sideways. But the instructional piece is key here. It's absolutely crucial.
And I know you're an adult now. It does not, though, give you the right to know your kids. You don't have the right to know your young people that you serve. You may want that. And when you do receive that, once again, that's a privilege. But you can't, be puffy-chested, walking in I need you to tell me the things that I need to know in order to serve you better, because it just doesn't work like that. We're in this digital, virtual age now where everything happens through Teams or Zoom or what have you. What's preventing you from having 2 or 3 meetings a week virtually for 15 minutes with the family? That's a good way to know your family and your student, right? Back to the idea that we mentioned earlier about how do we get connected outside of just the confines of the space in which we teach our children, right? Be innovative. This district and this system doesn't typically promote innovation. We give you all the things that you're supposed to do in service of the young people, and we have and hold an expectation that everyone will rise to the occasion and meet this standard. It just doesn't work like that in the real world. Sometimes we have to take steps, and measures outside of normative historical behaviors in order to really show up for the people that we serve or seek to serve.
Other questions?
So just want to preface this with a genuine all due respect to PLU, because the guiding principles, and I love it here, and I love you all, and I think you're different, but that double-edged sword, we're coming in trying to come genuine and build trust, but we have to drop that boulder of white guilt, but we are coming with a history, and probably a bad history of interactions in student of color's lives, and I'll speak in the context of Black educators, because those were the voices that we were hearing in that podcast, but just hearing it through that lens on that podcast of yourself and Mr. Taylor explaining the Mrs. Jackson story and how important it is, where is the push in teacher trainer programs to have Black educators teaching groups of white future teachers? Yeah. Just to have that consistent touch. We do, like I said, you're pretty close. But is there a push for that? Is there a desire to get an more integrated, more consistent influence to not check a box, but train white teachers better?
Could I start with this?
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't I? This is mine. As the person who teaches a lot of these courses, right? The 544 class, the 332 class in the undergraduate cohort, the 562 class, virtually every other class I teach. The fact that this hasn't happened more often is a failure on my part on multiple levels. The first level is that I don't probably have a deep enough network locally to bring in enough different voices to allow me to decenter myself from this space so you get more perspectives of other folks. Right? So that's one. Right? The second part of it is, I try to communicate to all of you that you're going to be educational leaders at some point. right? And I know that educational leadership usually starts in the K-12 classroom, right? Folks don't usually just do bachelor's, master's, PhD. Lots of folks do, teaching certificate, teaching K-12, decide, oh, I want to fix some things, and they go up through the system, right? So I also need to work harder at making sure that I empower those of you who maybe identify as BIPOC to give you the kind of skills, help give you the kind of skills you need to be excellent teachers so that then you could be future educational leaders. So then it's not just me and people who look like me who are in front of groups like this. There's a lot I cannot control, but there are several areas I need to do better at. So I really appreciate the question, because I think that sometimes goes unspoken, right? That as a practitioner, I have to do a better job of bringing in different perspectives like Shomari's into this classroom space so that it's not a special occasion. It's typical. It has to be a feature, not a bug of the program and of my courses in particular. So I appreciate that.
Shit. All right. Okay. Here's the deal. We ask of others to do things that are in service of our growth and the growth of the people around us when it's really your responsibility. What do you do? And what are you doing to increase? And again, I'm going back to this concept of we're in this space where I don't even have to be here. I could be right there teaching a class from my office in my home, right, down the street in Bellevue. I could be across the country and show up today. I can record something in 15 minutes around a subject matter that we want to engage folks in, just so my perspective is added into the space. I can download something from YouTube to say, let's listen to this, or podcast, whatever the hell, right? There are so many resources out there that it becomes your responsibility, and it also becomes your responsibility. Everybody's responsibility. Just because there's something devoid from your experience doesn't mean that, oh, well, I guess I just didn't get it. Hell to the no, man. That's not the way this works. If you want to learn more about the black family, but you don't have any friends who are a part of a black family, then you can do hella research about how to get to know this black family better. You can invite yourself to the home of a black family that you are serving in your classroom. What have you. We've got to get out of our way. We are so lacking in courage in this era. It is despicable, right? The amount of people who are afraid to come to me and ask me a question is outrageous. They know my response is going to be pretty in their face, but guess what? That's okay, because that's the way that we need to learn. We need to learn through discourse. We need to learn through having an experience or an opportunity to be in our feelings. We need to be okay with the fact that there is a challenge or something that is not making me feel as comfortable as I'd like to feel in my whiteness. We got to be okay with that, right? That's the only way you learn. That's the only way they learn, right? And education across the nation is this, right? It's not your fault. And it's not your fault to any other educator in this space. This is what we were taught, right? We were taught that this is the normal history of education. This is the normal history of our country. This is the normal way that we have as an expectation for folks to learn and to grow in this particular way at this pace. And if you don't, you suck, right? And you don't belong, or you need to be over there in special ed or whatever. Nah, man, come on, bro. We got to do this thing differently. And so I implore the folks in this classroom that if you're not getting what you want, speak up. And if you're not getting what you want, even after you speak up, you got to find it somewhere else. Y'all can call me for all I care. I'll get on a call with a small group of you and just dialogue. You know what I mean? Because that's what you might need to understand better how to serve within the spaces in which you're presently serving.
Excellent. Thank you, Shomari.
My question stemmed from a part of the article, the idea of being so close yet so far from being able to help their community. And I know and assume that my image of helping a community is going to look much different from a person of color helping their community. But I'm worried that I have a frustration of wanting my kids to feel so valued in the classroom that what if my frustration becomes too much and it turns into white guilt, and where is that line of making sure that my kids aren't the ones supporting me to make me feel better and I'm the one supporting them to make them feel better?
It's a complex question, and the one thing that I would say is that for all of you, especially for you who are new in the profession, it is so incredibly vital that you have a team. Like, who's on your team? You know, think of this as a basketball team, you know, and there's 5 people on the floor at one time. Like, who is on your team passing you the ball? Who are you passing to? Who's making the layup versus who's jumping the shot from outside of the key, right? Like, your team is established and will be the benefactors of your brilliance as much as you are the benefactors of theirs. Right? How often does your team come together and meet outside of this classroom space? You know, is it once a week for 30 minutes? Do you have a happy hour every other week? Like, how do you discuss and debrief how I'm showing up? Right? How do you analyze how I'm showing up by way of asking those who you're seeking to serve? Right? Like, we've got to use some strategies here in order to figure out who we can lean on, but also really deeply know how we're showing up for others. Right? Like, especially if you have a little bit older kids, you know, it's a little bit more complicated when you got the littles. But when you have a little bit older kids, you can ask them in a survey on Monday morning, okay, this is what I thought about last week and my experience as a teacher with you all last week. How do you guys rate my experience? Okay, let's discuss this for 5 minutes. All right, great. Let's get on with our week, you know, and just continual self-evaluation. You know, one thing I'm really tired of? Like, we do these surveys throughout the school year, you know, student surveys, there's self-evaluation surveys, self-assessment surveys, whereas we ask the kids twice a year, probably some 50 some odd questions, how they feel about their experiences in school. You know, whether they feel affirmed, whether they feel supported, whether they feel adults have their back. We break this information down by everything, you know, by race, by special program, by age, by classroom teacher, by anything, right? And we can really parse out, like, which teachers are not doing their jobs and which ones are. But teachers are not required at all to look at this information. They're not required at all to grow, to learn from the information that's being gifted to them by students. They're not required in the least to utilize that information that might be considered evaluative to help them grow. I think that sucks. When I was a kid, at the end of the school year, maybe it wasn't even at the end of the school year, maybe it was a little bit prior to the end, our teacher in the classroom gave us a thing that we had to fill out to say, am I a good teacher? And we had to hand it back to them. And they were required to read it, right? I don't know where that went. Was that a Chicago thing? I don't know. Was that a California thing? I don't know. But nonetheless, like, self-evaluation consistently is so radically important. You know, this continual learning thing is actually a real thing. You know, you need to learn as a learner alongside the people who you're trying to instruct to learn. If you are, I've made it, I don't need to learn anymore, you don't belong in the teaching profession, I promise you. Because there is no end to your growth when it comes to the young people that you're seeking to serve.
Yeah, and I think just one little addition to that is, and it's a simple concept that we kind of started to talk about in the 562 class if you're a graduate student, and I think we even touched on it in the 332 class. It's the Nell Nodding's concept of expressed versus assumed needs and understanding. Like, look, many of us who identify as white sometimes struggle, sometimes can be paralyzed by anticipated white guilt, if that makes sense, right? Like, oh my God, I'm going to say something bad or wrong, so I'm just not going to say anything. And I think sometimes we just have to sweep that aside, because I think it gets in the way of serving the kids who most need to be served. And to me, it's always just a really simple conversation that starts with a question, what do you need? I'm not going to assume that I know what you need from me. I'm not going to assume that you need me to contact your mom or your dad or your guardian or a grandparent. I'm first going to check in with you and have you tell me what I can do to help you. And once we get to that point, then we're working in service with and to the people we're trying to serve. And it allows us to abandon all of that baggage that we sometimes approach our work with that is connected to our whiteness and all of this, all of these different feelings we have attached to how I'm going to screw up and, oh my God, and what gives me the right. And we just sweep away all of those narratives and get to that place where it's just a conversation about how can I serve you right now and what do you need? Once we get to that space with students, I think the whole world opens up a little bit. I don't know if that answered your questions. There you go.
And hopefully it helps you to ask more questions. Like, you should be writing down, what questions do I have of myself, even, like, as I walk down this journey. You know, I don't even know that I ever intend to answer fully the question as much as I am anticipating that my statement is going to cause you to ask more questions of yourself.
This was part 2 of our 6-part episode. Please visit us next week as we continue with part 3 of our episode at the Coffee with a Little Bit of Cream podcast.